Mrs. Hockenstock. Now, Mrs. Hockenstock is a good teacher. She cares greatly for her students, and she prepares early in the day for every lesson. And today she was particularly excited. See, she had brought something they hadn't yet seen, a brand new book that she had found just that weekend. In fact, it was a very special book. It had amazing pictures of places that, well, most people never get to go. But she had to wait for her class to get there, and she wanted to make sure that she was prepared for everything. Now, the first person in her class that we would like to introduce, her name is Margaret. Now, as Margaret comes in, let me tell you a little bit about Margaret. You see, she is a really good student. In fact, very attentive. Loves to do what her teacher tells her, always obedient. But, well, she was really kind of smart, but nobody would know it because she wouldn't talk. She almost never said a word the whole day in class. Now, another one of the students, not so difficult time with the talking thing, he happened to like to talk quite a bit. His name was Joey.
Joey has entered the building.
Now, Joey's problem wasn't that he wasn't obedient. In fact, he actually was pretty obedient.
I got you an apple. I grew it myself in my backyard.
Joey's problem was just that he always was talking about himself. He thought he was, well, really smart and really cool, and he liked to tell people that. Now, there's another person in this class that we'd like to introduce to you, and this person's name is Susie. Now, Susie, on the other hand, she wasn't such a good student. I mean, she didn't pay attention in class, that is. She didn't care about the learning part of it. Susie's biggest deal was she would much rather, well, show off her latest fashion, prove how special she was, how popular she was. But as far as the smart goes, well, she had a little ways to go. She needed a lot more learning. Now this last person, okay, I'm going to warn you before he comes in, because this last person is the very definition of unique. He could, wow, I don't know if I could really explain it. I'm just going to say he's a strange, odd little man. Yeah, now you know what I mean.
Look what I brought! Oh my goodness.
Bucky?
Yes, his name was Bucky. You see, Bucky was a nice enough guy. He just had a hard time sitting still, had a hard time being quiet, had a hard time controlling his imagination. He had a hard time listening. And it wasn't that he was trying to be mean or disrespectful or not learning. Here, Bucky, you drop this. Would you like that back?
I like your hair, but it's been better on other days.
It's just that Bucky could not focus on one thing at any given time.
Dude, what is that like?
It's a microphone. No, sorry, Bucky. That's the other thing. There's nothing Bucky wouldn't try to get his hands on if I let him. Mrs. Hockenstock, now that all her students had arrived, greeted the class.
Good morning, class. If I can have you guys sit down. Bucky,
Good morning,
please turn
Miss
over that chair
Hockenstock.
around, please. Come on, sit in.
By the way, I do like it.
Bucky,
Very
turn around. Turn around, please.
Could you just let me turn around?
No, you turn yourself around, sweetheart, this way.
Oh my goodness, you so...
Okay.
Even if it took a while, he was happy to obey.
Did you guys have a good weekend?
Now, she wanted to tell them,
Yeah, no, I need to get my nails done too.
I studied all weekend because...
So she-
I'm such a good student.
having greeted her class, decided to tell them a little bit about what she had prepared for them this day.
I have something extraordinary for you guys. I've never seen this book before.
Does it have anything to do with someone's an idiot?
Bucky,
Fingernail polish? No fingernail polish. But
many amazing pictures.
it has amazing pictures in it and amazing stories. We cannot wait to tell you more about it.
No class, not yet. You see, she wanted to make sure that she didn't miss a single person, so she decided before we get to the book, we need to take roll.
Yes. Roll. All right.
Margaret?
Margaret? Are you here?
Just a sheepish little reply. And then, just as Margaret replied, well, the person beside her tugged on her pigtail. Well, apparently it came out.
Joe.
Oh,
Are you here?
that was rude, wasn't it? I'm sorry, Miss Hockenstock. I would never do such a thing. It's just that, you know, in my moments of weakness, I just...
Joey, just say here.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Continuing on with roll.
All right. Okay, let's see here. And I forget this every day. I'm so
Susie.
sorry. Susan, are you here? Oh, my name is... I'm sorry. Do you see this outfit I spent 2 hours?
Yeah, it would be kind of hard to miss you, Susie.
Sorry about that, Susie. I'm getting tired. I don't know. Been here for several years. And Bucky.
Somebody call for Lou!
See,
Call him up.
Bucky was still distracted.
Here, too. That one.
Good to see you here, Bucky. All right, keep the noise down.
By the time she finally got the class under a little bit of control, she prepared to get to the book, and then just as she picked up the book to begin to read,
All right.
wouldn't you know it, ring, ring,
Oh, we have recess here.
recess. Can you believe it? Recess, right as the special part was supposed to happen. I think that means that they should have recess outside.
Outside.
I am not sure what song that is. Now, Mrs. Hockenstock, wanting to make the best preparation that she could to share this book, stayed in the classroom, but she moved to the back desk that she had, and she studied her books, getting ready for the lesson. As soon as they would come back from recess, she wanted to be completely prepared. Now, the kids didn't know that she had stayed in there. And while recess was still in session, in wandered a lonely, quiet figure. You see, Margaret couldn't wait. All she thought about as she left for recess was this book that was supposed to be so special, showing pictures of places that nobody had ever been. So she had snuck back in during recess to take a peek at the special book. She opened the cover and she began to observe the first pages. The first picture, she was awestruck. In fact, she was so enthralled with this book that she had sat down, she got absorbed in it, she wasn't paying attention to any sounds. She hadn't even noticed Mrs. Hockenstock sitting in the back of the classroom. She didn't even notice the slight creak of the door as it opened a second time. And Joey stepped into the room. You see, Joey also was curious what this book had in it. But even more than his curiosity for the book, he realized, oh, Margaret's in here. You know, every time that I go up and pull her hair, she freaks out. In fact,
Oh my goodness,
she freaked out that time too. Margaret tore the book from fear when she jumped in fright when Joey came in and startled her.
You ripped the book.
Margaret burst into tears uncontrollably, saying, there's no way, what can I do? But Joey, being the kind of gentleman that he is, said, I can fix it for you.
I can fix this because of awesome.
I know what I can do. I've got tape,
And I took 2 years.
and I know just how it's supposed to fit back together. I know how to organize the pages again. I'll get it all just right, and nobody will ever know. Joey, I don't think you have enough tape. Be careful with the apple, and he's measuring to make sure the book fits together just nicely.
It's pure genius. Perfect. Listen to this. Just by my
Now, this whole time, Mrs. Hockenstock had sat at the back of the room. She'd seen the whole thing, but they were so distracted by the book. Well, then when Joey distracted Margaret, and she screamed and tore the book, they never even looked to the back of the room. Well, with the book reassembled as best as he could, they snuck out back to recess, hoping that nobody would notice what had happened. Well, Mrs. Hockenstock, having seen the whole thing, waited till recess was over, gathered at her desk, and of course, the bell rings. and the students began filtering back into the room and taking their seats.
To me, FBI!
First bursting in the door was Bucky, of course, flying some imaginary plane, telling an imaginary story. Who knows, maybe he was crop dusting his apple orchard he owned. I've heard all the stories there are to hear about Bucky. But following quickly in was Susie, happy to be back in class, showing off her fashion, talking about all the special things she'd done in recess.
Did I tell you I became a cheerleader?
This girl creeps me out.
But not quite so loudly. In fact, kind of quietly walking into the room, hoping not to draw attention, were Margaret and then Joey. Both of them hoping that nobody would notice that anything had gone wrong. In fact, Joey walked in like everything was just normal. Margaret, on the other hand, looked at the floor.
Mrs. Hockenstock, no one definitely tampered with the book at all, ever. Because if it slightly looks out of place, it's probably not because it's out of place.
It's
just
out of
because
place?
no one caught it.
So,
No.
Mrs. Hockenstock got the class gathered around, got them to sit down.
Oh my!
Bucky,
Bucky, get in your seat right now. Put that seat forward.
Have to go
Stand
through
up.
this again?
Stand up. Stand up, Bucky. Get up and turn that seat around. Okay, what's your name? Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
now, Mrs. Hockenstock, though she saw what had happened and she knew everything that happened and who done it and who tried to fix it, she didn't let the class know right away. In fact, she said, "All right, class, now that we're ready," and she began to
Alright.
pick up the special book.
Oh my
And suddenly, she gasped. Bucky gasped. Susie gasped. Joey gasped. But Margaret, well, she just looked at the floor and softly began to whimper.
What's wrong with you?
Mrs. Hockenstock looked at Margaret and said, Do you know what's going on? Is something wrong, Margaret?
Is there something wrong?
Is there anything you'd like to tell me?
Is there something you want to
No,
tell me?
Margaret sat there just crying, afraid to speak even a word.
Oh, Margaret.
Susie was the first to pop up. She said, "I know what happened. Saw the whole thing."
Please.
I saw the whole thing.
And she proceeded to tell Mrs. Hockenstock.
You see, I signed up for my cheerleader class. I also signed up for dance class in recess because, I got my cell phone and it has pink sparkles on it. Anyways, I saw what happened.
She said, "I know who did it. It was Margaret." And she pointed an accusing finger at Margaret. Mrs. Hockenstock had her sit back down. And even before Susie could totally sit down, Joy pops up and says, "No, not Margaret.
It was not Margaret. It was definitely not Margaret.
It was me."
You see, I was here late studying the other night in the schoolhouse.
During recess?
I just may have happened to see the special book. And
He says, "It was me. You know what? I even know the page number that was torn."
You do.
Well, you see, I have photographic memory. So at the day when
Bucky, sit down.
It's simply based on my photographic memory. So it's all good now.
Mrs. Hockenstock just listened patiently.
Oh, okay.
And
During recess, right?
right in the middle of Joey's confession, Bucky burst in with a story.
Yo, I know what really happened. This is what happened. You want to hear what really happened?
What?
Okay, it went like this. Zert came in, and he went over to the book and put his blaster from Stun to Kill and shot the book. I came in and said, "So we meet again." And he said, "For the last time." And then we battled it out for a little while and he wound up falling off the elevator.
Who knows where he came up with that? I don't even think there is an elevator in the school. Of course. Of course, Mrs. Hockenstock, after all, had seen the whole thing. She knew what the truth was. She knew how it had happened. And she began to address the class, telling them each that they had lied and how they had lied.
Now, Bucky.
Yes, ma'am?
Zerk, your father, Do not come in and tear up that book. You don't know that. That is a lie, Bucky.
You made up a story.
You made up that story.
Even if it was just for fun.
You like the story, didn't you?
It was quite colorful, but it wasn't the truth.
She said, Susie, on the other hand, you just wanted to be spiteful.
Yes, Susie. You wanted to be spiteful and get somebody else in trouble. didn't
Even if you happened to be right.
you? Even if you happen to be right.
Telling the truth to hurt somebody else is not a good reason.
Yes, it's not a good reason at all. You know that, Susie. I know you.
Joey,
Joey.
I know you were just trying to defend Margaret.
I know you were trying to defend
I was
Margaret.
only
Be on
trying
her
to
side.
protect her.
Yes, I understand.
She said, but class, I saw the whole thing.
I saw the whole thing. I was in the back of the classroom getting all my dates corrected. Yeah, my dates.
Of course, as she said that she saw the whole thing, Margaret, of course, burst into tears, knowing that she couldn't hide it any longer. And for the first time that whole day, in fact, probably the first time that whole week, that whole month, well, maybe the whole year, Margaret spoke. She said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Hockenstock. Even through all her tears. Even through all her tears, Margaret spoke up and said, I am so sorry, Mrs. Hockenstock. Now you see, Margaret, having confessed, kind of got the rest of the class's attention too. Joey followed through himself.
I have to confess. I lied to you, and I'm deeply sorry. Can you have a please? I'm sorry.
I know that,
Oh, that's it.
you see, Joey knew that even if he was lying to protect somebody, it was still a lie. And we should always tell the truth. Susie, for the first time not talking about herself, stood up.
Miss Hockenstock, I'm really sorry.
I lied. I didn't see what happened.
I really didn't see what happened. I feel like Bucky. I'm so
And maybe even for the first time that whole year, Bucky didn't make up a story. Didn't tell a fancy tale. He might have danced with his chair, but
Miss Hockenstock, I stretched the truth a little too. You see, yeah, well, you see,
I never saw.
I didn't say, so we meet again. It was Zerk that said, so.
Now, Bucky.
Okay, I didn't see what happened.
Okay.
But sometimes you just gotta go to battle with people. I'm sorry.
I forgive you, Bucky. Sit down.
In fact, Mrs. Hockenstock didn't just forgive Bucky. Mrs. Hockenstock forgave Susie. Mrs. Hockenstock forgave Joey.
Joey, I forgive you.
Mrs. Hockenstock even turned to Margaret.
Margaret, I forgive you.
And for the first time that day, Margaret was smiling. Not sheepishly looking at the floor, not crying tears of sadness.
It smiles!
You see, lies are like that. They make us think only about ourselves. In Bucky's case, he just wanted to tell a story to impress, to have fun. Bucky. Susie didn't see it. She just wanted to hurt someone's feelings, even if she had to be right, happened to be right. Joey only wanted to protect Margaret. It's, after all, the whole reason he tried to tape the book back together. But he really shouldn't have lied either. See, lying does that to us. It makes us think only about ourselves. But when they confessed, what happened? When they confessed they had lied, when they told the truth, in Bucky's case, he said, yeah, you're right, I made that up. Or in Susie's case, who said, you know, I never did see it. Or Joey, who said, I had seen it, but I was just trying to protect Margaret. And really, even especially for Margaret, who normally wouldn't have looked at anybody, wouldn't have said a word. when she confessed that she had lied by not telling the truth, by not telling anything at all, just by crying. What change did you see? They were able to smile once again. Margaret not crying. And they could then focus. Well, now that they had gotten that sorted out, Mrs. Hockenstock gently tried to open the first page, make sure everything was arranged. You see, she still had a very special story to share with them. And as she started out, you still read all the words, Mrs. Hockenstock?
I think so.
And what do you know? But the first story in the book was about truthfulness.
There we go.
What a coincidence.
Glad we all learned that lesson already.
One of my last flight.
Let's give them a hand. Now that they had confessed that they had lied, now that they had told the truth, they could truly have enjoyed the story, and probably did. You see, the story wasn't just truthfulness. There were also all the pictures that went with it that were of real places, of special places. What a reward it was for them after they told the truth, after they confessed their sin of lying. Maybe you find yourself in this situation sometimes. Maybe it's not that you just out and out tell a lie. Maybe you just have an imagination and it's kind of like a game to you. You just like to make up stories, just for fun. But when somebody asks you a question and you make up a story instead of telling the truth, that's still a lie, even if you don't mean it to be one. When you don't say anything at all, that's the same as not telling the truth. Just like Margaret. Margaret could have jumped up right away. In fact, she could have gone in first thing after recess and said, Mrs. Hockenstock, I didn't mean to. I really didn't. I just wanted to look at the book before everybody else and I ripped it. And she probably would have been forgiven. And all the rest of it happened. Well, she wouldn't have been embarrassed by Susie. But because she chose not to say anything at all, it hurt her until she confessed that she had lied. Or maybe you're a little more like Joey. You don't lie. Not usually. You wouldn't want to normally at all. But when you see somebody else getting hurt, you would rather jump in and take the blame for them. But in this case, you can't do that. You can't take the blame for something you didn't do. That too, even if for a good reason, is lying. I don't know who in this class maybe you relate to the best, but think about that. That no matter what kind of lie it is, a lie by not saying anything, a lie to protect somebody else, or just a lie to hurt somebody else, or a lie that, well, you just didn't know what you were talking about and you told the story anyway. That they're all lies. And that truthfulness, the Bible teaches us that truthfulness is a command from God. Let's all bow our heads.